platform is a Marxist platform, and it's an anti-family Marxist platform. And it's amazing to me because I lived through the whole era of the Soviet Union. And I remember when we finally, because of John Paul II and President Reagan, those two together really brought the Soviet Union to its knees. And we thought that's the end of communism. People now saw how evil communism is. It's really a Christian heresy. It views mankind as an economic being. And if you can fix the economics, you can fix all of humanity. And it eliminates the whole idea that it's sin that's caused the problem, not an economic problem. And so I could not believe it when, again, in a few years, we've seen Marxism is now being taught in the schools again, socialism and Marxism. Our Lady of Fatima spoke against this. She was very adamant about it. And it's just an evil way to rule people. Just read the writings of John Paul II and Benedict. You see that everywhere. And I think that this is being taught to our kids today in the public schools and in university. It's being taught on television and movies. There is, again, arising this praise for communism and socialism, and it's running rampant in China, and we're letting China get away with it. China is it's the new evil empire. The way they treat their people and forced abortions and slave labor. That's why we buy all this free cheap stuff from China. That's because they have slaves over there basically that are making these things, and we're buying them. And North Korea and others. Yes, the answer to the question, yes, we are living with the evil fruit of Marxism. And the sadness is that we are not catching it and not teaching it. And even too many of our own are espousing these kind of ideas.
Thank you, Steve. This is a little bit of a follow-up to that thought process is how can we in the United States, as we still have these freedoms and our country is founded upon these, how do Christians here help those in other countries and those who may even be experiencing more severe persecutions? How do we work together as a Christian community?
It's very difficult. I don't deny that it's very difficult. We have two problems. One is we need to reverse the things in this country. There's a lot of things we need to do in this country. And then what can we do for other countries in the world? I think, and it's not a cliche that we need to pray and fast and make sacrifices for this, but we also need to be vocal about it. We need to write about it. We need to teach about it. Too much of it's also being taught in our churches. I'm sorry to say, and even from the Vatican, there's too much of a soft touch towards Marxism, a soft touch towards Islam. And I do a whole talk on Islam. I gave it at the Franciscan University of Steubenville at the request of Scott Hahn and the others there, the professors. And they asked me to speak on Islam, and I did. It was called Islam, What Every Infidel Should Know. It's on YouTube. You just type in Steve Ray Islam, and it's a 50-minute talk. And I think that we have, even in our own church, we're not having a real honest appraisal of what Islam really is and what it does and how it treats people, and Marxism as well, and the other isms. We need to be clear in Christianity to speak out against these things, and past popes than those have. I mean, when you read Thomas Aquinas, what he writes about Islam, it'll make your hair curl. I read it in that talk that I gave. But I think we need to be teaching our young people especially what freedom is and what Christianity has brought to us and what these other isms will do if they're left to grow to their full rotten fruit. And we have to support the good causes, support the correct teaching and ideas. And it's not going to be easy. And it's actually very scary. I don't want to leave on a sour note, but this is my view of history. I think, what is it going to happen unless the Lord comes back? And I know the book of Revelation says that things are going to get very nasty before they get better. My view of history, and it's a very kind of a dismal view, is that on one side we have 1 billion Muslims who want to bring Sharia law and bring the Western world under the rule of Allah. And we know what happens when that occurs. And on the other side, we have 1 billion communist Chinese who also have intents of making the whole world communist. And we have these two huge powers rising up on our left and our right. And we as the West, which are supposed to be Christian with high morals and strong economies, we are all collapsing right while these two overarching powers are rising up. And I don't think that it's very a good view for what my grandkids and great grandkids are going to experience. This is why I love when Mary appears at Guadalupe and La Salette and Lourdes and Fatima, and tells us that we need to pray and we need to make sacrifices and we need to live the life and demonstrate to the world that we really have something worth living for, and hope that the others will see it and come on with us. But if we don't train our children for the next age, and I think we're doing a very poor job of that when I look around, we're going to lose it.
Thank you, Steve Ray. We do have a question. This came from yesterday's talk as you were talking about your conversion story from Baptist to Catholic, and I wanted to make sure I got this question out. It's from Jonas, who's in the Philippines. He might be sleeping right now, but Jonas, we're going to ask your question. He said that you had mentioned early in your faith you were a Protestant teaching Catholics how to stop being Catholics and convert, and now as a Catholic, what are techniques that we can do to convert the Protestants to Catholicism? So he's just looking at how do you make that shift?
I'm doing Zoom talks in the Philippines too. I've done 2 already, and I'm doing another one in October. And I've spent 6 times we've been to the Philippines, and I understand what's going on there because they're a country, and I'll do this specifically for the Philippines just for a minute, is they're a country that's been Catholic for 500 years. They're celebrating their 500th anniversary next year, and they've invited me to come, but I'm not going to be able to because of my schedule. But they had no outside influence attacking their Christianity. They were just born and raised Catholic, and they love Jesus and Mama Mary. That's what they call her, Mama Mary. They have a great devotion. And all of a sudden, these new ideas, cults and sects and denominations started to come in like a virus from the United States and everywhere else, and started telling them, well, here we have the Bible, and if you just look at this verse right here, it says you need to be born again, and they start. And the Filipinos are naive people, and I mean that in a good way. They're simple and naive in their faith. They just love it, but they've never been taught to understand it in the form of defending it. They've never understood the arguments that were going to come against them and how to defend it. So what I would say to the Filipinos is when you have these different cults and people coming against you, they went from almost 99% Catholic down to less than 85% now because of this. And also many are leaving for kind of a secular view, is that when you're dealing with these cults and this is their common currency. This is what they have as an authority. And if you want to talk to them, you don't quote from the catechism because they don't have any respect for the catechism. If you want to deal with evangelical Protestants, you have to know this book, and you have to know how to counteract their questions with this book. And you have to know how to defend the faith. It's called biblical apologetics. But I think that the bottom line is we have to really know our faith, why we believe what we do, what we believe, and that we have to live it out in a daily life, and we need to teach it to others.
Absolutely. Steve Ray with us again. I want to mention that CatholicConvert.com website and just a lot of resources there. You started with us, Steve, again, talking about defending the Eucharist. And I want to just, as we move into, for us, the noon hour, this lunch break time, one of our questions came yesterday, actually, and was referring to some of the polls that we've heard over the last year or so with statistics about how many Catholics actually believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And so what can we do on a daily basis to help those Catholics who may not believe in the true presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist?
It doesn't surprise me that few people do. I'm surprised that more people don't believe it. Why? Because they've been very poorly catechized over the last 50 years. We have failed in the catechesis of our children and of the church, and we need to be much better at catechesis, much more faithful to the teachings of the fathers of the church and of the true tradition that we have. Number 2 is we have a whole generation, the 2 generations that have grown up on television and gadgets, and they spend their time on those things, and they're not interested in the spiritual things because parents have not made it their priority usually. And they get into schools, and this is another thing I say, that when you send your kids off to school, you better be careful where they're going to school. Even if it's a Catholic school, you have to be careful because not all Catholic schools are teaching the truth. They're getting in there with liberals who are questioning Catholic faith and teaching other things. And if you send your kids to public schools, you know what they're hearing over there, and you better be ready to counteract that, because the parents are the primary educators of their children. It's not the school, it's not the priest, it's not CCD class, it's the parents. And if we're not teaching our kids, like I told you I did, and look at that, I'm having success because we made that our life goal, more important than anything else, to teach our kids the faith. But the people don't believe also because we're in a culture today that says that you have to know everything by your five senses. It has to be proved objectively. And you can't, that bread, come on, when you go to communion, it tastes like bread. It tastes like wine. It doesn't taste like the body and blood of Christ. So it can't be, because my senses tell me no. But we have to teach our young people to realize there's a whole spiritual dimension. Our culture has said there's only the scientific, and if it can't be proved scientifically, it doesn't exist. Well, no other cultures ever believe that. All of us have believed that there's a whole supernatural, spiritual realm to reality. And we have to teach our kids to live in the reality of that. And third of all, I would say there's a whole, we talked about Eucharistic miracles. I think it's a good thing to take kids when they're young and teach them about Eucharistic miracles. Watch movies about it. Watch about Our Lady of Fatima. Watch about La Salette and Lanciano and Orvieto and these marvelous Eucharistic miracles that are scientifically proven. But it's a whole change of emphasis in our lives. Because we live in a world that is secular, scientific, and it denies everything. We have to bring our kids back and help them understand there's a whole spiritual world. And it's not going to be easy to do because we're fighting against a monolithic culture.
Okay, Steve, we have time for maybe just one or two more questions. And I do have a question that came up, and I think I'm gonna paraphrase this for the person who asked. Is, I think in this time Christians may be criticized about, you don't love people who are LGBTI or who are Muslim or who are socialists or somebody who is different than the Catholic faith. And what about love your neighbor as yourself? And when we get those oppositions of, well, you're not loving these certain people, how do we respond? Because we do love all people. They are created in the image of God. But what about what do we not want to support in how their behavior is?
Well, the world wants us to say that you can do anything you want. That freedom means the freedom to do anything you want. But when our country was founded and when Paul in the New Testament spoke of freedom, it was freedom to do what was right. The King of England told you what to do and you couldn't do what was right. But the freedom in America is the freedom to do what is right, not the freedom to do anything you want to do. And I like the story of, if you see a man walking along a path and you see it's in the dark and there's a cliff, and you know there's a cliff right in front of him, and he's walking along, and in 2 minutes he's going to go off the cliff and be killed. And I grab him and I tackle him and I throw him to the ground, and I may even break a rib in doing it. He'll say, that's not very nice. You are not loving. Well, yes, I am loving if you know exactly what would happen to you had I not stopped you. I love the person, and I loved him enough to stop him from falling off the cliff. We have said as Catholics, and people don't let us say it and they don't want to believe it, but we can love the person and hate the sin. I can love the Muslim and hate Islam. And I say that very clearly. Islam is not a good religion. It does not have the same God we do. It's a very different religion. And I can love the Muslim. I can sit, and that's one of the problems. Somebody knows a Muslim who sits next to them at work and says, wait, I know her. She's a wonderful lady. So why are you so upset about Islam and all this? I know I'm not talking about the Muslim. I have many Muslim friends in the Middle East. I do. But I can say that I love the Muslim, but I don't like Islam. And I will teach against Islam. I can love the Marxist and hate Marxism. Two guys across the street from us are two gay men, and they think they're married. And when we moved in 15 years ago, the neighbor said, well, you may not want to live here because these guys live across the street and you have kids, you know, and they don't. Well, I said, you know what? I am going to love them because they're made in the image of God. And I'll let them know that I don't agree with what they do, but they're going to find us to be the most loving and friendly neighbors they've ever had. This is a long-term evangelistic project. So when we moved in, we invited them over for dinner. We knew what they were, but they walked in and there's the Sacred Heart, there's Our Lady of Guadalupe, there's the Divine Mercy. They knew, they're thinking, I'm sure, these are supposed to be the enemies that hate us. Why are they loving us? And now 15 years later, one of them comes over and he sits on the couch and talks to us for a couple hours. We find out now he's praying all the time. He's singing Christian songs. I said, but my problem is that the church doesn't accept my lifestyle. Well, we're making progress. So now he's open with us. He talks to us, and it's a long-term evangelization project. But I have the obligation with those two guys to love them because they are made in the image of God. And I do not have to accept their lifestyle, and they know that I don't. I've told them that. But love overcomes in the long run. So we can, in our culture, and we have to make it clear that I can vote against agendas for the gay lifestyle and abortion and all of those things. It's not that I don't love those women. It's I love them enough to protest it. I love them enough to say it's wrong. If you let your little kid do anything he wants, you don't love him. If you love him enough, you'll keep him from putting his finger in the light socket. You'll keep him from crawling into the fireplace and burning himself. We have what's called tough love, where sometimes love is tough, and it stops the man from falling off the cliff, even if we have to knock him to the ground.
All right. Thank you, Steve. I've got one more question, and I wanted to get this in again from Richard in the Philippines. We have a lot of Filipinos tuning in, so thank you so much, Richard. And Richard refers to the prayer, Hail, Holy Queen. And he says, in the prayer, Hail, Holy Queen, who is being referred to as Hail, my life, my sweetness, and my hope?
It's referring to Mary. And I know there's a lot of people that say that we give way too much praise to Mary over and above Jesus. And the Filipinos are known for their love of Mama Mary and for their effusive emotion and love of her. Prayers like this, we understand that without Mary, we wouldn't have Jesus. Mary, I have the two guys that I talked to about across the street. They had this big log, 50 pounds, 5 feet long. And it is two icons. One icon is of Jacob with his ladder, and he's holding it there, but he's looking over to this side. And then down on the other side of the log is an icon of Mary with Jesus in her womb, and the angels are doing this, pointing to Mary. And what it is, it's a Greek Orthodox, and in their liturgy, it says, Hail, Holy Queen, the ladder which brought God down from heaven for us. In other words, Mary is Jacob's ladder, so that she is the one that brought God down from heaven for us. So we Catholics, we love Mary. We are effusive in our love for Mary. Jesus loves his mother. Jesus brought her up to be the Queen of Heaven. And we realize that, like I said in my talk earlier today, that the Queen Mother of the King ruled in the kingdom with her king. She was honored and loved as the Queen Mother. Jesus is the King. He's divine. We worship him only. It's called adoration. Latria is a Latin word. We worship him. But the queen sitting next to him is human, and she's Mary, and we adore her and we love her as who she is. And we have effusive language about what we think of Mary. And because of her, she is our hope, our love, our joy. Why? Because she was the one that brought Jesus to us. And another way, I'll just close it by saying this. I tell everyone that I'm married to the most beautiful girl in the world. My wife is the most beautiful woman in the world. And that's the language of love, not the language of precise theology, correct? Because somebody may challenge us, oh no, Miss America last year is much prettier than your wife. Yes, but I love my wife, and I say she's the most beautiful woman in the world. We love Mary, and we have many adjectives and ways to describe her. She's the seed of wisdom. She's the burning bush. She's a source of joy. Why? Because she's the one that brought Jesus to us, and even now she's the Queen of Heaven. Jesus honors her enough to have her seated at his right hand, and I don't think it's going to be very good when you get up to heaven and say, Jesus, I'm only going to look at you. I don't like you, woman there on that door. I'm not gonna, you think you're God. I'm just going to talk to you, Jesus. I don't think the Lord will be pleased with us if we have that attitude towards his mother any more than somebody's going to be pleased if we have that attitude against our mother here on the earth.
Well, Steve, I just want to, on behalf of all of us here, and I'm just going to give Sister Anne Marie an opportunity to get up in front of the chapel and help us close, because we're going to close this hour with the Angelus and lead us into the noon hour here. I know it'll be 3 o'clock for you on the East Coast, but again, we just thank you for your time, for your energy, for your witness, and what we need to do is continue to follow that witness each and every day.